Hello out there, and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Camp podcast. Damn it. I'll have to edit that out later. It's no longer jump camps. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Lab podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haines, former UCLA Bruin, former 2 meter 22 high jumper, of no repute. I was crappy. What am I talking about me for? All right, let's start again. Oh my God, I'm so tired. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar, the Sky High and Fly Jump Lab podcast. I'm your host, Troy Haines, and I'm here this evening giving you a quick podcast without a guest because I'm just off 2 weeks, just like everybody else. Just finished the Olympics. It's still kind of settling in on my brain. I'm also looking forward to the Paralympics, which is coming up. Have a couple athletes that I have trained for a small time that are going to be over there competing, and very anxious to see how they do, even though I'm no longer training them. I just find the whole thing so amazing. I love the Olympics. I think the Paralympics are awesome. I really hope and pray that they do very well from a viewership standpoint, because what those athletes are doing is amazing. The ability to train and work and persevere, overcoming all these obstacles along the way is just amazing. And I love it. I've talked about this before here on this podcast, how just geeked up I get watching. I don't care what it is. I watched breakdancing, and I was almost choked up with emotion watching people compete at a high level. I know there's been a couple of the breakers that were getting mocked on some of the social media, but it wasn't the top flight ones, because man, they were doing some stuff that I just found absolutely amazing, and I was transfixed by it. But the other things that are the usuals were just as good as usual. The track and field, the gymnastics, men and women, beach volleyball, tennis was awesome. Golf, thanks to Scotty Scheffler shooting an amazing last round. So many things, to watch. I'm still going through it. I have the Peacock, and just put basically everything on play and record, and I'm still working my way through it. So I tried not to figure out who won things. I tried to ignore social media as much as I could, and just watch it, for the first time. So some things I'm still catching. I haven't seen everything in swimming. I haven't seen everything, and even the sprints. I have watched the jumps, the high jumps, especially men and women qualifying. Watched the decathlon. I have not watched the heptathlon one yet, but I have it, and I'm kind of taking my time going through it. But yeah, just stoked to see what already has transpired, and just kind of revel in it. And man, 4 years from now, we have the Olympics coming to LA. How exciting is that? It's gonna be so awesome. And I can't wait to see, who's on the stage at that point. Looking at the Olympic high jump, I was amazed at the transformation of the fields, even in just a 3-year cycle. From 2021 to 2024, both the men's and the women's fields were radically different. There were some of the same players, showed up, and some of them were starting to show a little cracks here, little, signs of fatigue and, aging have definitely crept in a little bit. I felt, amazed watching our young American, Shelby McEwen jump well. He was, I think, probably the common pick. I remember talking with Doug Nordquist right before the jumps, and his pick was Hamish Kerr, and that wasn't a surprise pick because he was ranked number 1 in the world. And he did perform up to a level. I had a few glitches here and there, but managed to come out on top. I don't think the quality was quite as good as just the last, run at 2021, Seemed like there were a lot more jumpers clearing higher heights last time that still didn't medal, I saw some newcomers that were awesome now. He may not be a newcomer to the world at large or whatever, but for me, even though this is my business, I still don't watch every single country and every single jumper. I did not know of any other Italian high jumper other than Tamberi. And yet, the young man who jumped and came in fourth had a tremendous Olympics. And I can't even remember his name right now, but, a new, to me, new single armor, and boy, he had a seasonal best and was right there. It came, he had the worst timing on his miss, I think. Like his jump record was just as good as almost anybody's through that, into the final four. Of the four guys that made, I think it was 234, he was right there. And then, it's just one miss at an earlier height, tripped him up. And I think Barshim was clean through there. McEwen was clean. I don't think Kerr was. Kerr was kind of languishing at the bottom, but then he made, if you made 234 on your first, you were an elite group. And then 236 on your first put you in an elite group. And that kind of decided everything. But wow, he was fun to watch. And, Barshim did a great job and was clean all the way up to where he usually is clean. And then I thought, who knows what the injury was with his calf, what kind of an effect that was having on his speed. I thought I saw him get a little choppy on his curve. It looked to me like he couldn't quite cycle and go as fast. I think he was trying to do a little bit more, probably a little more power, through there, just because he didn't have the speed that he usually had. Now, technically, in my eyes, as a double armor, he is a quote unquote power jumper. I want to kind of talk about that here. I'm going to do a blast about that here another time, and I've done it in the past, power versus speed, but power versus speed is kind of a misnomer, because power in physics, the world of physics, power is force times velocity. So when I'm talking about someone exerting a lot of force on the ground, or someone who conversely maybe is using a lot of speed, as you play between those two variables, you are producing power. So if I have someone producing the same amount of force and they run faster, that increase in velocity has actually raised their power number. If I have somebody who's running, at the same speed as somebody else and they're exerting more force when they get there, then their power number goes up. And you can play with both of those, right? Obviously, I think most people would say, hey, power is a good thing. I'd like to have more power. And you'd say, how do you do that? Well, you need to get both the ability to produce more force and also produce more speed, more velocity. And when those multiply together, wow, you really have something, in the world of physics for sure. And that applies directly to the high jump. So his speed numbers, I thought, were down, and he was trying to produce force, but he's not usually your force production guy. He produces a pretty high amount of force at a high speed, which I think has always been the stock and trade. Perfect body type for that. You look at Barshim on film, I mean, he looks skinny when you're watching TV. And the old adage is, TV adds 10 pounds, right? Well, it doesn't add them to him. But if he looks 10 pounds heavier on TV than he actually is, then, oh my gosh, he's got the perfect high jump body, speed and strength to weight ratio. But when you slow him down, I think it just, it's a chink in the armor. Now, whatever was that caused that, maybe a small training injury or whatever. I've never seen him ever run at the bar like he did in the prelim. And he was clean in that one too, right up until the time that he missed. And then all of a sudden he's kind of gimping up through and he ran through the plane of the bar. I was like, wow, I've never seen that before. And I was worried that he'd blown his Achilles out or something. And I was kind of surprised that he even took the jump that he did, because he didn't really need to. That was another thing we should go over. So a couple controversies in the men's high jump. One of them was, what in the heck was the jump off for? I'm still amazed by that. I've talked with Doug Nordquist, who again has been to an Olympic Games and has competed at the world level, on a very high level. And he said he was looking it up in books that he had. And I'm like going, is this a recent rule change? Because, I, for one, have been to and been in meets where you have to break ties and you have to do it in a very systematic way. The high jump is set up that way. For instance, as you cut the field from 24 jumpers to 12, right? You keep raising the bar until theoretically there's only 12 left. Well, sometimes that isn't an easy process. I mean, if you have 13 guys left and you've finished a height, you go up to the next height until what? One of them, doesn't make it, or, maybe you jump that height, and since only a couple make it, and now that it's over, according to everybody else, you go, well, these two guys made it, so they're in, and now we're going to take 10 more, and you start using the tiebreakers. And how does that tiebreaker go? Okay, well, who made this previous height? Everybody else missed these. These two guys are in. These 10 or 11 guys are left. They all made the previous height. When did they make it? You would say, well, the guys made on their first jump, they're all in. The guys that made on their second, like how many are those, right? So it's usually a simple process. And to me, in my brain, I always just do that. You just go, hey, what happened in this height? They tied. Fine. What happened to the height before that? One guy made it on his first, the other guy made it on his second. That's it. In my mind, that's the simplest and the most obvious. And so when it came down to Kerr versus McEwen, right? And I think they both made, I think McEwen had the last of the double misses. When you looked back at their jump record, they both had 2 misses, and they both had 2 misses at the same height. It happened to Kerr earlier, and he was almost out, kind of like prelims. He had 2 jumps at prelims at, I think it was 220. He had 2 misses, and then he boomed it, and then he was back in the running. McEwen was clean, and then I think it was 234, or maybe it's 231 or whatever it was, but he got, all of a sudden he went make, and then he went miss, and then boom, and then he was back on track. He made a couple more in a row, right, on his first jump. And the same thing happened to, Kerr from New Zealand, but his 2 misses were earlier. And so when they look at the jump record, I'm like, okay, they both made 236. Great. They both made 234. Okay. When you went back, there was a point where Kerr made it on his first and McEwen had 2 misses. And that's where I said, well, it's over. And that's why I thought that when he took his third attempt at 238, where he just ran up and then crashed into the pit, because I thought, and I remember talking with Doug, and Doug said, yeah, he thought it was over at that point, because make or miss, he wins on that elimination process. And then they start talking about this jump off coming up. And I'm like, wait a minute, why are we having a jump off? And they go, well, and I looked it up on the internet, of course, and on the internet, took me a couple tries, but it said, okay, first tiebreaker, the same height. Fine. We did that. You went to 236. They both made it on the first. You back it up 234. I think they both made it on their first. Okay. But at that point, they said, well, after the first one, I think, even the second one didn't matter. My brain immediately started going height to height. But it said after the first one, if there's a tie still, then you count up all the misses, no matter where they happen. And I'm like, oh man, that's just, I don't know. That is something I've never, ever even considered. I've heard it before. I remember hearing it other times. I'm like, why would you count up the misses? What does that have to do with anything? I could have a couple misses at earlier heights, and then once I got my step down, I was nailing everything. And that's going to punish me later when I'm beating the same guy that tied with me because of his misses. But I jumped this height on my first and he jumped it on his third. Well, I don't get it. But that was what it was apparently. And they went ahead and jumped it off because they both just had 2 total misses. On the straight count back, and the same kind of logic that they use in trimming the field, right? From a big number to a small number, from the prelim to the final. I thought that ran the whole thing, but apparently there's a different set of rules. So they had their jump off, and, I don't know. I'd heard somebody else tell me that they offered them the same deal, that they were tied and they could have both taken the gold, but I heard that McEwen didn't want it. He wanted to have the jump off. He wanted to win the gold and have the other guy get the silver or whatever, or earn it, or I don't know what. But I heard that. I don't know that that's an official thing that happened. So that was one controversial thing. It didn't end up affecting anything because I thought Kerr won, and then Kerr ended up winning in the jump off. So no harm done from my point of view. I thought McEwen jumped great. I was just like anybody else. After the prelim, I picked McEwen. I thought McEwen looked just solid. And boy, his first jump, at 7'1" was a monster. It looked like he was a foot over 7'1". I've never seen a clearance like that. Even I got to watch Sotomayor in person when he came from Cuba to the US right after he broke the world record. And I still have that clip. I'll stick it on the screen one time. I took 6th in that meet. So I got to jump against the world record holder, and I got to watch him jump 7'8.5". I jumped 7 feet, the opening height, and came in 6th. So there was a good field there. I was really happy to be in that meet, but there were other names on that list. Hollis Conway was there. Brian Stanton was there. Lee Balkin was there. Who else? The jumper from Cal, Moore from Cal was there. And then, Sotomayor. Who else? I think that was it. And there was a bunch of everybody on that list I'd never managed to beat before. I think I managed to beat Lee once, Lee Balkin. So anyway, and having watched that, I remember Sotomayor opening at that meet at 7'2" and making it by like 6 inches. And I'm just standing there going, wow. And then he went 7'2.5", 7'4.5", 7'6.5", 7'8.5", boom, 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 4 jumps, all the best jumps I'd ever seen in my life to that point. And his 7'8" clearance in the 7.5 was like by a good 6 inches, I thought, when I'm watching it. And then he jumped 7'10.5", which is what he went. 6.5 is 230, 8.5 is 235. So he went to 240, and he clipped it with his heels on the first jump, and then he kind of just futzed around his last 2 and got out. And I remember thinking those are the best jumps I'd ever seen. But that 7'1" clearance by McEwen is up there with one of the best jumps I've ever seen. And at that point, I thought, oh, I think it's over. The only thing I think that hurt McEwen was that he didn't have a lot of experience with the kind of pop that he had on that day, with how long should he wait before he went into his layout position, or, what's the timing? Because timing's huge. You take that 7'1" jump and he's over it by 10 inches, but when did he start to lean back and break the plane? Where can I fit the bar under his body when he's throwing that 7'1" jump? I think you could have put, 7'8" or 7'10" under there and had a chance at some point, right? Depending on when he leaned back. But either way you look at it, a monster jump. Never seen anything like it. So he had that going for him. Now, when you go back to the prelim, the thing about the prelim that I found really interesting, and again, I talk with Doug all the time. We're going to be going to a golf tournament here in a couple of weeks. I get to talk with him and Leo Williams, who I'm really looking forward to talking with both of them, because they were on the 1984 team together. Leo was the first alternate, right? So as we talk those events, they're always telling me about great jumpers and places they got to go, and I'm so envious. I love listening to stories. I just can't help it. And I want to hear what they think. But when they did the prelim, when they got to what did they jump? They jumped 214, I think they jumped, and then 219, and then 224, right? So 224 is 7'4.5", and 219 is like 2.5 or something. When they got to 2.5, I think they still had plenty of people left. So they had to go to 4.5. Is that how it worked? I think that's how it worked. I'm trying to remember now. I should do my research before I do the podcast. As I was watching it, when they got to the height that they ended up with like 12 to 14, I know that they went up because they kind of had to go up. But at the same time, I remember thinking, well, we're right there. The number is pretty much there. And if you were clean to that point, I remember thinking, if I had a jumper and he was there, like McEwen, clean. Barshim, clean. Tamberi was not clean. The Italian kid, the other one, clean. There were like 4 guys, 4 or 5 of them that were clean. Also want to shout out both, Wu was pretty darn good. Not as good as he was the last Olympics, but pretty darn good. And the Japanese kid was really flying. They had 2 of them, but the one that jumped 7.5 and he PR'd in the final. He was right there in the mix. He was fun to watch. Not real tall, light and fast and flexible. But anyway, they got to that point where I'm thinking, okay, all these guys that made 7'4.5" on their first jump, they're in. I don't care. You move the bar up, there is no way that anybody's beating my jump record, or unless every single person jumped at the next height and made it, I would be in. So I remember thinking I would even take the place of, okay, you want to put the bar up, you put the bar up. I'm wherever I'm at in the order. I can watch the first couple guys go and go, oh, there's no way. There's just you could get the feel of how high the group is going to jump. And I would have said, you know what, 7.4 1/2 and no misses is in. It's got to be in. And it turned out that was easily the case. And yet many of those guys took jumps. And to the point to back up my point was like when I watched Barshim run at the bar and come up lame, right? He grabs his calf, he runs through the plane, he's laying there. They bring over somebody to start talking to him. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he just popped his Achilles, right? Seen it before. I watched Kevin Durant do that. Seen people hit the ground. Kobe Bryant, when that Achilles goes, it goes, and you're laying there, and they don't roll around on the ground in agony all the time. They're just kind of like holding it and going, what's going on? So nobody knew, and then he ended up running back and jumping and making it on his next try. And I remember thinking, what the heck is he jumping 7.5 for? He didn't need that, especially on a calf that may be ready to go. So that was, to me, a kind of a more major controversy to me was why so many of the guys that had an excellent jump record, like McEwen, ended up jumping it. Now, in his defense, I think that cat was on fire, and there was no reason in some ways to save any energy. It was like, I was really surprised when he missed in the final. He had gone along clean, just like he jumped in the prelim. He was perfect in the prelims, starts in the finals, same way, opens at 7.1 and booms that by 10 inches, like I said, and everything else looked easy. And then I think it was just maybe a little lack of experience and maybe just timing over higher bars, because he cleared, a career best in that, and still after that. So, him taking that extra jump, probably not a big sin. And they did have 2 days in between. Like they jumped on Wednesday. They got Thursday and Friday off. Two extra, an extra day of recovery for sure. I always contended that when I was in high school, we had the 2-day state meet, and they still do it now. For a long time, they didn't. They switched it back to 1, and then they've gone back to 2 more recently, where you jump on Friday and you qualify, you come back Saturday. I was never built for that. I don't think, because I was too big for my height, my weight at 6'3", 195. I would be willing to bet if you weighed me, and right now I'm still at age 60, I'm 199 pounds. I weigh almost exactly the same I did in high school or college, except more of it's in my belly and less of it's in my legs. But, when I look at that and I go, man, body type wise, I was always at a disadvantage. I had other athletes asking me, other high jumpers saying, what are you, a decathlete or something? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, you're kind of big, for a high jumper. I'm like, I'd never thought of it that way, because I always had an image problem where I'd had people tell me that I was skinny, when I was playing football in high school and everything. And I'm like, oh, I'm too skinny. I kind of liked carrying a little extra weight. I still don't think I look huge by any means, but some of these guys, when you look at Barshim, you look at the kid from Japan, you look at Wu, Tamberi, almost all of them. Kerr looks like a pretty rambunctious guy. He's 6'6". He doesn't look skinny, what I call skinny. But that strength to weight ratio, problem is, the reason why the 2-day thing was hard for me, because I didn't get any rest. The next day I'd be a little taxed, and just slower to warm up. And, I didn't know anything about ice baths and all that stuff back then, right? I just remember sitting in the hotel room and thinking, man, my shins are kind of sore. And I had nothing the next day. And I never did back to back in high school that I remember. And college, we had a day in between NC2As, so prelims to finals. And the one day was better than none. And I was okay, the second day, but I still didn't feel awesome. Well, these guys had 2 days. And McEwen's another one. That guy does not have an extra ounce of fat on him. He looks tall and rangy and quick. And he looks like the kind of guy that if they'd have said, hey, the prelims on Wednesday and the finals tomorrow, he'd have gone, fine, I'll take another jump at 7.5 just to be sure and cut loose. So again, a little hypercritical when it comes to saving energy for the final. But at the same point, hey, I think McEwen was playing with house money at that point, because he was rolling. I remember thinking in 2021 that he looked pretty good. 3 years later, he has arrived. He looked so much better, so much more prepared, so much more confident. You can easily see the difference between Tokyo and Paris, right? Just by the not just the fact that he performed better, because he had some monster jumps in Tokyo as well. But oh, he looked like a different cat, jumping. So it was great to see one of the Americans, back on the stand. It'd been a couple years since we had one. I think Kennard won, right? Back in, was it 2008 or 12? I can't remember which. And then it'd been a little spell for us. And if you look back in the history books, the United States dominated the high jump early. And when it first was competed, like I think 8 or 9 in a row at one point that I remember seeing. And then we went through, the 70s when we had 68, Fosbury invented the flop. He wins the gold. Then we had Dwight Stones, who was a great jumper and broke the world record a couple different times along the way, but never managed to win a gold. And then from like 84 for a while, we didn't see an American up on the stand, or even 76 was, I don't even remember who won in 72. But 76 Stones got the bronze. 72 Stones got the bronze. So he got bronze. And 80, we didn't go. We boycotted because of Russia. 84, the Olympics were in our house, and Dwight Stones took fourth, even though he jumped higher than he had in any other Olympics. And then, we had a spell. I'm sure there may have been a couple. I don't know my American history in the high jump that well. But I do remember Charles Austin breaking both the American record and the Olympic record in winning the Olympic gold in 96 in Atlanta, right? So, and then Kennard won. So we've had a couple guys, but we're not like the overwhelming dominant power in the high jump, which I still think we should be, because we have an unbelievable number of athletes over here in this country. We have over 200 million, 250 million, close to 300 million people. That's a lot of athletes, right? We're not some tiny little country with like 5 people in athletics or something. So, but we do lose a lot of the jumpers to other sports because track and field still doesn't make that much money. You can, and thank God for these athletes that work so hard. I'm so happy for the ones who capitalize on their minutes of fame on screen, win or not, maybe a great personality, maybe a great showing. Even if it wasn't a gold, sometimes you can get a commercial out of that. So fantastic, right? Because these guys work so hard. Okay. I don't know anybody, out there, if you know about track and field and you watch these athletes train, you come to start appreciating it. And when you start realizing that some of these people train for 8, 12, 16 years trying to get there, they've gone to the trials, they've gone there. My favorite story is the British triple jumper who started off, in his first Olympics, finished almost dead last, came back again, finished 20th, came back again, finished 8th, and came back again and won it and broke the world record. And, you hear those kinds of stories and it makes you realize, how long it takes sometimes to perfect your craft and to learn these movements. They're very difficult, So I think track is a great sport for athletes in other sports, because you can take an athlete that may be an outstanding football player, soccer player, basketball player, volleyball player, whatever, and actually make them more athletic through your track training, teaching them how to run better, how to do certain movements better, how to have better agility or balance or coordination or whatever. And, most people would be on track saying, yeah, it's not a bad idea, to do that. And track, that doesn't mean the track athletes themselves can necessarily, change sports and go have success. Some have. We have had some track athletes, transfer over to the NFL and play. I don't know if it's as prevalent in basketball. May have happened. Hear about it more in football, because football is all about money and exposure and everything. I remember Ronaldo Nehemiah was one back in the day. Bob Hayes, great sprinter, I believe, competed in the Olympics for the U.S. and then played for the Cowboys. Who else? There's been other guys that ran collegiate track that played football, but Marquise Goodwin for the 49ers, another. I know there's others in there. Marquise Goodwin, I believe, placed and maybe even might have won the long jump or one of those jumps, and then ended up playing for the Niners for a little while. I think he might still be in the league somewhere. But yeah, because speed is king in the NFL. But anyway, fantastic. The men's qualification round and final was really, really good. maybe not quite as much depth as we had 4 years ago when Tamberi and Barshim, split the gold. But there were, 2021 was exceptional. And in some ways, they did have an extra year that time to get ready, right? It's a 5-year cycle due to COVID, whatever. But there were a lot of people jumped very high in that meet. I think there was more overall that jumped higher then. I remember Wu jumped really high and didn't even medal because, the two guys jumping out of the over the ceiling, in the last one. But then this cycle was a short cycle. Maybe that had something to do with it. And there was a lot of young kids there. I hadn't seen Edgar Rivera from Mexico. I was really excited to see him jump because I remember not the last Olympics, but the Olympics before. I think it was 2016 was the last time he made it. And he had some unbelievable jumps in the final where when he makes it, he really makes it. Like he'll jump 6 inches over stuff. When he struggles with his timing, he'll knock stuff off on his way up, or maybe he throws his head back too early, but he's fun to watch. He was a guy I'm looking forward to. One of my favorite stories was Donald Thomas from the Bahamas, 40-year-old who has been to 4 Olympics, right? And he had an interesting start because it was either 4 or 5. I can't even remember. He's been around for a while. He was a guy who was playing basketball in Jamaica or the Bahamas, sorry, and watching his local team, practice. He was over there playing basketball and dunking all over the place. And the bar was like at 6'6" or something. First time he ever tried it, he jumped over 6'6". And then I guess within a few weeks of practice, he was already jumping well over 7 feet and had already started appearing on the national scene. So just an unbelievable talent, obviously, and had been to the Olympics before, jumped 237. So he was fun, but he didn't have a good prelim. I don't think he might have made one high. He might have no high. I don't even remember. But I love the story. I think Brandon Stark made it to his 4th Olympics. I think Barshim had been in 4. Barshim has the most medals now. And I think he's got 1 of every color and he might have 2 silvers or something. So I think he's medaled every time he's made it. And that's better than anybody, including Sotomayor. And the other interesting fact about just the high jump in general at the Olympics is that nobody's ever won the gold more than once so far. It'd be fun to see that trend change, but it's so hard, 4 years in between. You go from a young kid to a, mid, and who knows what happens in those 4 years. Again, it's hard to make money in this sport. It's hard to keep training because sometimes life intervenes. You meet someone, you fall in love, you decide to get married, you have a kid, everything changes. The more stays, I always say this, that old saying, the more things stay the same, the more things change. And you hear that said the other way sometimes, like sometimes you're thinking, well, it's only been 4 years. How could it change that much? Like, well, life intervened, stuff happens all the time. And, monetarily things change, sponsors change, times change, and all of a sudden, like I said, you look at the Olympic field from last time to this time, there's certain countries that didn't come. Ivanyuk wasn't there from the ROC, the Russian, whatever they call it. The ones who aren't taking massive amounts of drugs. What was the Belarus, the kid that took the bronze, who looked really good 3 years ago, nowhere to be seen. And political times change. We got a war between Russia and Ukraine. We got wars between the Israelis and others. And, always fun to see, people put aside their differences to come and compete. I'm always glad to see that nothing has happened that's terrible. Unfortunately, we have the instances in 72 in Munich, well documented, horrible, time. And also, the bombing at the one Olympics 96, right? Atlanta. So there have been times when the political and/or crazy have intruded upon the Olympics. It's such a big spectacle. There's so many people there, but I do love seeing the competitive spirit, people fighting so hard, and then at the same time having grace and class and helping their competitors up off the ground, giving them hugs when they, have something hard happen to them or whatever. It was kind of interesting to watch when Tamberi, finally missed. And, he had like his whole support crowd came around him and everybody's giving like a group hug with like 20 people in it. thought that was pretty cool. I know there's always the machos and everybody that watches someone like that break into tears, and they're like, oh, look at him, he's whatever. And I'm thinking, you have any idea how hard that guy works, and have any idea how excited you'd be to come back as a defending Olympic gold medalist, and how much you want to represent your country, and how much he wanted to jump well. And who could have guessed that he would get kidney stones a couple days before talk about terrible timing, So yeah, I have all the admiration for him in the world for getting up out of the bed and competing it all, and showing up and being like, hey, this is my medal to defend, and I'm going to give it everything I've got, even though I'm not feeling my best. So it was a fun spectacle. The women, I think, it kind of went the way it was supposed to go. Our new world record holder, Mahuchich, she really looked better than everybody else. And when you look at it, her and Ola Slagers jumped the same height, but that wasn't the true story. The true story was she didn't miss basically until it was over. And Ola Slagers put the pressure on her, but I don't think she was ever really pressured. The two misses she had at 202, she looked like makes. I can't remember exactly why I thought the angles weren't good this year. I thought the angles were a little bit better that they used in 2021. But, there were two jumps when, Mahuchich looked like she had 5 or 6 inches of clearance. And 202 is 2 meters is 6'6" 3/4. 207 has got to be at least 6'7". So I think it was either 6'8" or 6'7.5", right? I think 203 is 6'8". So 202 is getting close to 6'8". She was way over on 2 of the jumps. And then she makes it, no, she didn't make it. She passed because it was over when Ola Sluggers missed her 3rd jump. So, but those two were by far the class. The other two were pretty good. Patterson, who's been a world champ before, and the other Ukrainian gal, and they got split a bronze, which is great. But that was down a height, down to 198 or whatever it was. And, so it was quality, but not at the level it could have been. Lisa Skeen wasn't there now. I think she finally retired. So been a little bit of a changing in the guard there. Some of the younger jumpers are pretty exciting watching. Who's the gal from Germany? Christina Hansel. She had a season or a personal best, jumped 6'4" 3/4, whatever it was, and was kind of pushing towards the mix a little bit. And then Kulachenko, the young gal that jumps over at the University of Georgia in the SEC here, but she's from Cyprus. She's got a lot of talent. And, I think she's competed obviously high at the NC2A level in this country. And then she's young. She's only 22. So I'd like to see her progress. Hansel's a little bit older, so I don't know if she's going to have another 4 years. But, as Barbara likes to say, Barbara Pachoka, my Canadian jumper that I've worked with, she says, people are kind of staying around a little bit longer. They're maturing, and continuing to grow at their craft, right? And sometimes it takes you a while to figure things out, and I do believe longevity has increased. Like Tom Brady played football till he's almost 45. LeBron's still playing. There's big dollars in the business of sports, and when you're talking about the ability to make money, either by promoting an athlete or that athlete winning you something, if you're going to pay an athlete millions of dollars a year to do something, you would like to have them go all the way through their contract, for one, and to continue performing at a high level is one thing, but making it all the way through the season without breaking is a big thing. So there's money invested in recovery, and just recovery from workouts, and also recovery from injury, right? Recovery and improvement and physical therapy and everything, get you back on your feet, get you back on the field. Huge amounts of money in that. And I believe that's kind of stretched out the lifespan of all athletes. People are competing longer at higher levels. So lots of fun was had. Well, I've had a chance to rant. We are looking forward to the Olympics again here in 4 years, right here in Southern California, at Los Angeles. Can't wait to see the torch lit. Can't wait to see what they come up with. We got 4 years to clean up the city, to get the buses functioning as good as they can, to get everything moving, to get the Olympic Village set up. It's just an unbelievably exciting time. There'll be all kinds of money to be made, stars, that are already here that will still be competing. New stars will arise. We had a young American who was still in high school that I believe got to run in the 4x4 relay, right? 18-year-old kid, or maybe even younger. I think I heard he might have been 16. I got to do some research. I'm terrible at this, as you may have noticed. I don't always know the names of everybody in all the events. Dwight Stones is way better at that than me, and then I believe better than anybody else at knowing all the people, all of what they've been doing for the last however many years. It's just amazing. I can barely keep track of, the jumpers that are here presently on one side or on both sides, men's and women's. So, but yeah, amazing, right? Amazing stuff going on and amazing stuff to pop up. So, join us again here soon. I'm looking to try to get more Olympians here to share their experience with us. Again, people that have made it to the trials that I'm so envious of, to talk about their experience there. And, anybody that got to go compete, I've tried to get Romaine from Jamaica, who jumped over here on a podcast. I just keep asking people and, seeing what they'll say. And hopefully they'll spend some time with us and let us know how cool it was. It sure looked fun to watch. The only thing I haven't watched in the Olympics this year, which is kind of a bummer, and I haven't done it for a while now, is boxing. I haven't been watching boxing for a while. I do remember in 1976, there were future, world champs littered throughout the U.S. boxing team. Sugar Ray Leonard, Michael and Leon Spinks, all gold medalists. Paul Gonzalez, from L.A. The team was just amazing. Had so many good boxers that went on to become, like I said, world champs. They're just amazing. So I haven't seen it in a while. That's the one thing. It just popped into my head for no real reason. I'm watching, everything else. I love that. If you get a chance to watch the trampoline event, as fun as gymnastics is, when they're just jumping up and down that trampoline and they go up and they do like 5 flips and spins and everything, come down, they're trying to hit that little cross marker and then go back up and do a bunch of more stuff. And then they come down, they land and they stop. It's a really fun event to watch. Very intense. So anyway, until next time, Troy Haines celebrating the Olympics with you, what we got to watch, what we got to enjoy. I'm not as much of a homer for the Americans. Obviously I am. I love seeing the Americans do well. I'm an American. I'm proud to be an American. I love seeing that. I would like to see more of everybody, which I still don't think we do a very good job of. I know there are other feeds out there like the BBC or whatever, where you don't even hear them talking, and they do show you every single thing. That's why I did like some of the Peacock coverage where it would show everything. But like, I remember watching the women's all around, and they would show one of the Americans or they'd show one of the other girls, and then they show them walk around for like 2 minutes while they're going, we're waiting for her scores. I'm like, okay, well, can we watch somebody else, please? One of these other athletes that worked and slaved and overcame injuries and everything else to get here, and see them do their, I don't care if they're falling all over the place, if they're falling off the bars and the rings or whatever, I still would like to see them compete. So I would like to see a better job of that, but hey, it's awesome. We always do get to see the best Americans, not always all of them. The men's 1500 meters was another one. Great race there, great finish. And, out of nowhere, the guy I saw him trapped against the rail. Then all of a sudden, one guy made a move and the other guy went to chase him, the guy from New Zealand and the British guy that were like 1-2. And I don't even remember his name. I'm apologizing right now, but man, he hit the gas and ran them both down and won the gold medal. It reminded me of Davey Waddle, which was a different race, the 800 meters back in 76, I think it was. But it was kind of like that. Like he was in dead last after one lap. And he just kept working his way up. And then at the end, he blew everybody away, and the guy from New Zealand, it looked like his strategy was 3 laps. I'm going to run everybody into the ground so that they don't have a kick. Boy, did that backfire. He ended up getting 3rd or something. So some really great races like that. The end of one of the long races for the gals, the female, I think it was the steeplechase, where one ran down the other within the last 100 meters. So some really great stuff. Very exciting to watch. So until next time, take your joy of watching the Olympics and channel that forward. Boy, we're really looking forward to 4 years from now and seeing the Olympics come to Southern California, seeing the trials here in the U.S. And, it's always a great time. When I was at UCLA in 84, there were athletes from other countries that would show up and start training over here. So it's just a really great time, really exciting. All right. Until next time, it's Troy Haines signing off on Raise the Bar. Don't forget, follow us on YouTube. We have the YouTube channel where you're seeing this podcast from. Also, follow us on Instagram. Okay. We've got both Raise the Bar, you can follow, and Sky High and Fly Jump Lab. And go ahead and take a peek at the website and see if there's anything that interests you. We have Zoom classes for those that are just starting in the high jump or really looking for coaching because they don't have a coach. And we have, low, medium, high range stuff through there. We do video analysis. We do virtual training. So give us a look. Okay. Until next time, Troy Haines signing off.